September 24, 1869. 10 a.m. On the floor of the New York Gold Exchange, traders are screaming. Men in top hats and frock coats are shoving each other. Fists are flying. Paper tickets flutter through the air like confetti at a funeral. The price of gold is defying gravity. In just a few hours, the price of gold has shot up 30%. The entire nation's economy, built on the gold standard, is being held hostage by two men. Gould, Jim Fisk. They didn't just want to get rich. They wanted to corner the entire gold market of the United States. They wanted to control every single ounce of gold in New York. If they succeeded, America's farmers would be bankrupt. The wheat fields of the Midwest, recovering from the Civil War, would be destroyed. Millions of ordinary Americans would lose everything. And it wasn't just a scheme. It was a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. They had bribed the president's own brother-in-law. They had the ear of the Treasury Department. They were so confident, they bragged that they owned the President of the United States. But they didn't count on one thing. General Ulysses S. Grant, the man who defeated the Confederacy, wasn't going to let a few Wall Street crooks destroy his nation. This is the story of the day Wall Street went to war with the White House. The day a handful of men almost brought America to its knees. This is Black Friday. Our villain is a man named Gould. Born into poverty in upstate New York, Gould was a ruthless genius. By 1869, at just 33 years old, he was already one of the richest men in America. He was a railroad tycoon, a stock manipulator, and a man who believed that laws were written for other people. Gould was a predator. He was cold, calculating, and had no conscience. His partner in crime was the exact opposite. Jim Fisk was the showman. He was loud, brash, and loved attention. He wore diamond rings, drove a carriage pulled by white horses, and called himself Jubilee Jim. He was the muscle to Gould's brain. Together, they were a nightmare on Wall Street. They had already made fortunes manipulating railroads. But gold was different. In 1869, the United States was on the gold standard. That meant the value of every dollar was tied to the price of gold. If the price of gold went up, the dollar went down. Farmers who sold their crops overseas got paid in gold. If gold went up, they made less money. Gould understood something brilliant and terrifying. If he controlled the gold supply in New York, he could control the price. And if he controlled the price, he could control the entire American economy. But there was a problem. The U.S. Treasury, the federal government, held millions of dollars in gold. If the Treasury decided to sell its gold, it would flood the market and crash the price. Gould couldn't corner the market if the government could undercut him at any moment. Gould needed to know one thing. Was the government going to sell gold? He needed a spy inside the White House. Enter Abel Corbin. A man with a famous last name and a gambling problem. Abel Corbin was married to Virginia Grant, the sister of President Ulysses S. Grant. In other words, he was the president's brother-in-law. He had access to the White House, access to the president's conversations, and access to his secrets. Gould and Fisk befriended Corbin. They wined him, dined him, and gave him money. They promised him a fortune if he helped them. They gave him a secret account, $1.5 million in gold, that would make him a millionaire. All Corbin had to do was convince President Grant that the government should not sell gold, that it was good for the economy to let gold prices rise. Corbin began his campaign. He told Grant that high gold prices would help farmers in the South. He told him it would help the economy. Grant listened politely. But Grant was a war hero. He knew how to read people. He sensed that something was wrong. In August 1869, Grant became suspicious. He wrote a letter to his Secretary of the Treasury, George Boutwell. He said, and I quote, "Let no one know that I have written this." Grant told Boutwell, "Don't sell any gold without my direct order." He had closed the door. But he hadn't locked it. Meanwhile, Gould was growing impatient. He had invested millions of dollars in gold futures. He had borrowed money from banks, from investors, even from his own partners. If the government didn't sell gold, he would be the richest man in America. If the government did sell gold, he would be bankrupt. On September 23rd, Gould cornered the market. He controlled more gold than the entire New York Gold Exchange. The price was $145 per ounce. It was insanely high. The entire financial system was teetering on the edge of collapse. Gould and Fisk bragged openly. "We own the president." But they were about to discover that they didn't own General Grant. When Grant learned that Gould and Fisk had manipulated his brother-in-law, he was furious. He had fought a war to preserve the Union. He would not let two crooks destroy it with money. On the morning of September 24th, Grant gave the order. He ordered Secretary Boutwell to sell $4 million in gold. Immediately. No delay. No warning. The courier rode from Washington to New York in record time. He arrived at the gold exchange at exactly 11 a.m., just as the price of gold hit $162 an ounce. The news hit the trading floor like a bomb. The government was selling $4 million in gold. The price of gold plummeted from $162 to $135 in less than an hour. The market crashed. The entire financial system went into free fall. Brokers who had bought gold on margin were wiped out in minutes. Men who had been millionaires an hour before were now bankrupt. The panic spread like wildfire. Businesses closed their doors. Banks stopped lending. The stock market crashed. Thousands of investors lost everything. Gould and Jim Fisk? They survived. Gould had gotten word of the government's plan minutes before the announcement. He sold his gold just in time. He walked away with a fortune. The aftermath was devastating. American farmers, the very people Gould had targeted, were hit hardest. When gold crashed, the dollar strengthened. Suddenly, the crops they had sold overseas were worth less. They were paid in dollars that had gained value, but they owed debts in gold. They were crushed. The government investigated. Congressional hearings were held. But guess what? Nothing happened to Gould or Fisk. They had paid the right people. They had the best lawyers. They escaped prosecution entirely. Gould went on to become one of the wealthiest men in American history. He died in 1892 worth over $100 million, equivalent to $3 billion today. He was never punished. He never apologized. Fisk was killed 3 years later in a scandal over an actress. But he died rich. Black Friday 1869 taught America a hard lesson. The gold standard was vulnerable. The financial system needed regulation. It took 40 years, and another panic in 1907, but eventually the U.S. created the Federal Reserve to prevent this kind of manipulation. But the lesson remains: when a few people control the money, everyone else pays the price. Gould almost destroyed the U.S. Treasury. He almost bankrupted a nation. And he almost got away with it. The gold rush of 1869 wasn't a rush for gold. It was a rush for power. And in that rush, millions of ordinary Americans were left behind. General Grant won the Civil War. But he almost lost the peace. And the only reason he didn't? Because when the moment came, he chose his nation over his family. And sometimes, that's all that saves us.